Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Dr. Jennifer Lee Disney, and I'm honored to be here with Jean Dowty, who is the mother of a South Carolina Mother of the Year. Jean is Judy Pittard's mother. Judy Pittard was the 2007 Mother of the Year, and so we are honored to be able to talk to a mother of the Year. So we see where Judy learned all of her tricks of the trade and got all of her wisdom. So this is a real honor for me. I just want to thank you for being here, Jean. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Would you start by just telling us a little bit about when and where you were born and raised?
I was born in a little village about 11 miles from Oxford in England, and we were kind of a self-sufficient little village. As I always like to tell people, we had three things that kept us together. We had a newsagent, because we didn't have radio, we didn't have television, of course. So we read everything we read, and I still like to have the paper first thing in the morning to look at the news. We had a pub for social events known as the Carpenter's Arms, and you think of a pub as people go to drink. Well, this was not always the case. Families came and had meals there, and there was a little garden where you could have your children run around. And the third thing we had was a little Methodist chapel. So we were covered on the spiritual side. So,
Wow.
Little self-contained community. We were outside the town of Whitney, which was one time was a blanket capital of the world. They used the blankets were made from the sheep from the Cotswold Hills. And fortunately, people no longer wanted wool blankets. So the whole tradition has died out. The factories are now made into flats, apartments. There was a lot of glove making there, and in fact, there's a letter from Queen Elizabeth I asking for a pair of gloves to be made in Whitney by the glovers there. And she wanted it. I'm sure she was not going to pay for it. She had a habit of asking for things.
Wow.
And getting them, of course. My father was a blacksmith, and my earliest memories are playing in the blacksmith shop. I had my own little anvil and little donkey shoes and hammer. What a wonderful place to be. You could be as dirty. You could get dirty. Nobody really bothered. But I was with my father, and that was important to me. Unfortunately, I didn't have a relationship with my mother, not because of her fault, but because she had been ill even before I was born. In fact, I have been told that she was told by the doctor she was having some health problems. Oh, the only thing for you, best thing is for her to have a child. You're going through the change of life. Have a child, which is why I was born, presumably. So my only memories of her, unfortunately, are of her in bed, either in a hospital or a nursing home or at home. That's a gap for me. But I never felt unloved. I had a sister who was 14 years older than I was, and she took care of me. And my father, I adored my father. There came a time when I was about, I think I was 8, when, because my sister was married and away, had her own family, I was went to live with my aunt, my father's sister. What a blessing that was for me. She was the biggest influence in my life. She had such a positive attitude. So she was my second mother, really. in spite of a lot of hardships that she endured, she was always positive. She had this outlook on life. And she suffered very much from arthritis, but she said, I'm just so thankful that I get out of bed in the morning. She said, if I didn't have to work and make money, I would lay in bed because everything hurt so much. But that was her positive outcome she got from this. So her constant thing to me was, because I was a teenager and grumbled a lot, was count your blessings, name them one by one. And that was one big message I got from her. This was where I lived with her until I was old enough to go out to work. And during the war, I joined the Land Army, which was an organization set up. We had uniforms and rules and everything, but it was set up for women to take the place of the men who had been called up. So worked on farms, logging, some people, some women, girls, really were girls, really worked very hard. And sometimes their employers were these farmers who did not want women there in the first place. They didn't think they could do the job, so that they didn't have a happy life. I was fortunate in that I was sent to a girls' boarding school where I was in charge of about maybe up to 300 chickens. I dug potatoes, I planted, I weeded, I cut grass. And it was a wonderful time for me, really. It was. We were in a fairly safe area. I was away from the cities with the bombing and everything. But that was my early experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we're interviewing you because you bring an international experience to our conversation as well. You're the first internationally born person that we're interviewing. Tell us about your education and your young adult life.
My education. I started in a school run by the Methodist Church. Then when I went to live with my aunt, I went to a church school run by Church of England, St. Matthew's. At age 11, we took exams to see whether we should go to the technical school or the school. Yeah. And I don't know why. I was a very poor student. But I got into the grammar school. We called it grammar school. The girls. Reigate County School for Girls. It's all separate. Where we wore uniforms. And we wore uniforms all through school. But, and I took Latin, French, and German. Did poorly and everything. I did pursue French through school, but did not like it. I was not good at math. It was a real pain. I liked English literature. I liked history and geography. That was, my passion. That's what I liked. We left school. We finished school at 16. I had no desire to do any more education. I wanted to go out. The war was going on.
Right.
And things were very, at this time especially, things were very touchy. We just didn't know what was going to happen. Germany had taken over Europe and a lot of the rest of the world, North Africa. And there just didn't seem any point in going any further. I wanted to experience life, while it was available.
That's right.
Just live for the moment, and that was the way I was. So I did I worked in an office. I'm sure it was like a file clerk. We call it clerk, file clerk. But then I was 17 and I had to do some sort of war work, which is when I went into the land army.
Okay.
So,
Wow.
so that's, I have taken courses in the States, at a community college. So,
One of the questions we have to ask is about when you were a young adult, before you got married, what were your dreams, goals, and aspirations? And you've talked a little bit about how living in wartime really does shape and affect one's dreams, goals, and aspirations.
Yes, it does. And you feel that, you live for today. You do, because you don't know what is going to happen. So things are so uncertain. So
I think that's a really important point. I'm glad that you made it.
Yeah. I've always thought I wanted to be a librarian because books were so important to me. So that was good.
I share that value.
She worked as a library aide in an elementary school once my younger siblings were in the elementary school situation. And was very valuable, I will say that. She may not, but I will say that for her.
So let's get to the later years of your life. So let's start with, tell us about how you met your husband.
I went to a USO dance. My husband was in the, I think it's the 98th General Hospital, American Hospital. He had been hurt while he was in France. A few days after the invasion, or maybe a year, maybe not a year, a month after the invasion. I don't know the time. I didn't know him, so I didn't know. And my friends had been to the dances there because the Americans would bring around a bus to pick up all the girls to come to the dance. And my friend said, the food is so good, you've got chocolates there. I mean, things we hadn't had. Things were in short supply. So, and I resisted for a long time. I was not a social person at all. I didn't want to be involved in anything like that. But they finally persuaded me to go. So I went once, and I came back and said, I've done it. That's it, no more. But the next day, I got a message from my friends from this GI saying that he'd met me and he really would like to see me more. I didn't have any idea who that was. No, nothing at all. I just knew nothing. And so I went out and it was a group of us girls and a group of some of the Americans. And so I got to know him, and I found out that Americans, maybe some of them might be all right. I had not been impressed until that point.
That's great.
So eventually we got married. Probably way too soon. We were married the following April, and I think I had met him in August, something like that. So it's one of these again, it was wartime. That's an excuse I use.
So tell us about the early years of your marriage and then the birth of your children.
Okay. My husband was sent back to the States. We'd been, our first year of marriage, I think we spent about, maybe at the most, 6 weeks together because he had been sent back to France. So he was sent back to the States, and in September, a year after we were married, and I had to wait to be able to come over, because you had to go through a lot of procedures to be able to get transport over. And I finally got transport in the following April. It was April of 1946. And I came over on the Queen Mary, which was still a troop ship. And it was loaded with women and children who most got seasick not because of the motion of the boat, but because they were introduced to this rich food that we had not had for 6 years. And so, that was one of the causes. I didn't get seasick. I was one of the lucky ones. But I landed in New York on April the 4th, 1946. And your husbands had to sign for you to allow you to come into the country. They had to be responsible. In fact, my mother-in-law had to sign a form saying she would be financially responsible for me when I came here. And first of all, my mother-in-law lived in Washington, D.C., so that was my first experience. And my first sight, really, of a different country was the separate restrooms, colored and white, separate places that you could go to. I had no experience of that. When the American soldiers came to England, they had asked, "Where do we go? Where's our theater?" "You come to our theater." There was not that separation.
You didn't have the segregation in the UK that the U.S. had.
No. And the reason was because I did not see my first sight of a black person was when I was 11. And this was when a missionary brought a child to school. So I was amazed. Their hands were white. That was my first thought about that. It's really strange, but that's why. But anyway, that was my first. And I came to a family. My mother-in-law was very prejudiced. She came from North Carolina. I was horrified. The way that the people talked, because this was something new to me.
And it just didn't seem right to you, it sounds like.
No.
It didn't seem right to treat other people that way.
No. So, but that was a very negative thing. And my mother-in-law from South Carolina, she cooked green beans floating with fat back. and to, after, as I said, not used to this food.
Right.
And then I became pregnant soon after, which made it even worse. We moved to North Carolina for a short time, and my husband rejoined the military, but my first child was born in North Carolina, near New Bern, and he was delivered by that same doctor that had delivered my husband.
Wow.
At home.
At home, of course.
Wow.
Made to lay in bed for 10 days. Certain things I wasn't supposed to eat. And, so different. But my husband joined the military, and we went first to Fort Knox, and then to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where Judy was born. So I had a boy and a girl.
So you have 2 children.
2 children.
Okay.
That should have been fine, right? Uh, From New Mexico, we came back to Fort Meade, I think next, Maryland. And then my 3rd child was born, another girl, so 3. And I thought, really, that was it. You know, that's enough children. We had several moves, Fort Lee, Fort Dix, just several experiences going around here. But then came to Virginia, settled in Virginia, and there I had 2 more children, a boy, a girl, first of all a girl, and then I thought 3 girls, oh my goodness. finally had another boy, so my last child was a boy. And he was, my oldest son was 17 when my youngest was born, so I had built-in babysitters. That was so good. I enjoyed my last 2, because I could hand them off.
You had help.
Yes.
So you had 5 children,
5
3
children.
girls and 2 boys,
Right.
over a 17-year period.
Yes, yeah.
Wow, you had your hands full, but you did have some older helpers.
That's right.
Which
Oh,
is
yes.
good.
They enjoy it. I mean, I think, I'll look at her. I think they
spoke to
enjoyed
them.
looking at them. That's it.
Yes, I think Judy told us how much she enjoyed being part of a big family, being one of 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was one of the older ones, so she ended up being a good helper to
Yes.
you.
Oh,
Hopefully when
yes.
the younger
The
ones
babysitter.
Yes.
came, she was the babysitter.
Yes, right. So we had our final tour overseas was in Germany, and we were there for 2.5 years.
How did you balance? You're a military wife, you're
Mhm.
raising 5 children.
Mhm.
I want you to tell us if there were other activities you were involved in, raising 5 children, any additional work inside the home, outside the home, community.
Mhm.
How did you balance, even just raising 5 children? I've raised 1 child, and it's difficult. How did you balance doing?
Well, I was not, as I said before, I was not a very social person. I made a few close friends. I did not work outside the house until Mark, my youngest, was in high school, I think, or middle school, anyway. I had done volunteer work. I was pretty active in church, my church. We did some things like patterning children that needed the exercise. I have done things like that. But I don't know. We had a very big garden, and I mean, that supplied just about everything we ate in the way of vegetables. And that kept us very busy. And canning, you know, I was a homebody.
Well, that's a lot of work to,
Yes.
to maintain.
Yes.
To have a garden that's feeding your family and
Mhm.
canning, and that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
She didn't drive until my father passed away.
All right.
Um,
That's right. That kept me home.
That limits you.
Not driving, that's true.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, what does motherhood mean to you?
I think to me, it meant that was my focus. It really was. It really was. And I think it means you give up what you want. You put your family first. You put your children first. That's what motherhood is, and it means pain, and it means sacrifice sometimes. It means worrying all the time. Because you never quite know, what comes around the corner.
Do you think women's roles as mothers and women's work as mothers inside the home, particularly all the work that you were talking about inside and outside the home, do you think women's roles and work as mothers are adequately recognized by society?
I'm sure I think they were more in my time, past time, because that's what women were for, really. It's pretty, doesn't sound at all as it should be, but that's the way, I grew up. Women's work was in the home. Men got out and made the money. So, and it's changed today. I know it has.
Do you think women today have a more difficult challenge if they are expected to work outside the home, be a second income earner in addition to the responsibilities of working inside the home and being a mother?
Yes, I'm sure, but I think sometimes we want more. We want more. We could be satisfied with less if we are willing to not make the money. As I said, that's pretty harsh, but that was the way I was passionate.
Well, that's a good point. Changing desires
Yes, yes,
leads to more work.
yes, it does. It does.
And maybe I'm thinking about the era in which you were born, and growing up in times of war, and going back to those thoughts about how you cherished the moment. You counted your blessings. You were glad for what you had because you were living in a life or death, short supply kind of a context.
Yeah.
And so that's probably a little bit of a part of what you just said now, being happy with what you have and not necessarily always wanting more.
Yes.
Which seems to be the value of contemporary consumerist society, right?
And to go into debt, and to my childhood memories, that was only something that the other people did. We did not. We waited until we had the money to buy it.
What an amazing concept. Right? So until you have the money to buy something.
Right.
That's a rarity today.
Yes, but
in your day, that's the way it was. That's the way you did things.
Right. We called it on tick, which meant you signed your name to something. No, you didn't do that. If you had the money, you could get it, but not until. No.
What do you think are the most important issues facing women today?
Well, again, I think it's balancing, making sure that what you're doing is worth something, worth a sacrifice, because you have to sacrifice something. You don't get something for nothing. There's always a payback somewhere or other. And I think, that's a challenge for women. And too, children today are involved in so many more things. We played outside. We didn't have organized things. So, now children are into swimming and sports and everything, which takes so much time for the mothers, I'm sure, and the fathers are maybe working outside somewhere. And so I think a lot of it falls on the woman, the mother.
It's making me think when you were a little girl in your dad's blacksmith shop and you had your own anvil and your own space and place to play. It's not clear that things are better today, right? With organized sports, organized activities, and you went outside, you went to your dad's shop, you played. It's just an interesting. You're just reinforcing how much things have changed.
Yes. With
child rearing. And then the question of whether things are better or worse is really a question.
Right. I didn't have toys. I had a teddy bear, and I think I had one doll. But I'll tell you, one thing we played with, and this may sound pretty gross, we played with snails. In my little village, and it was Cotswold kind of era, we had stone walls, and the stone walls were covered in moss. We made palaces on these stone walls, And snails were our king and queen. And
That sounds beautiful. To me, you played in nature. You didn't need plastic on a plastic created joy.
Right.
You found joy in nature.
yes,
I mean, we talked about that. That was a running theme in Judy's interview, wanting her son, taking walks with her son. And
yes.
so I think some of that, a love of nature was transferred from you to your daughter.
Of course, we didn't think of it as nature. It was
Right.
fun.
Yeah, that's important.
Yes.
Let me ask you this. What was it like when your daughter was named the South Carolina Mother of the Year?
Oh, extremely proud. Everybody that I knew about it because I broadcast that.
You must have been a proud mother.
Yes, indeed. And a lot of the family came to the tea. Yes.
One of the things that was so beautiful to me was when I interviewed your daughter, the first thing she said when she knew she was named Mother of the Year was how excited she would be to bring you to the tea at the governor's mansion. So it says something beautiful about your relationship.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And let me ask,
She was my first girl.
your first daughter. Well, you clearly have a great mother-daughter bond.
Yes. Yeah.
What was it like going to the tea at the governor's mansion to honor your mother?
Oh, it was very nice. Got to meet the governor's wife. The governor was not there. But it was beautiful, beautiful. I was amazed at how beautiful it was and what a festive occasion it was, too. And
Was this Jenny Sanford at
Yes.
the time? So you got to
Yes.
meet Jenny Sanford?
yes, yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And my mom was in the receiving line through the whole thing, and she sat and held one of her great-granddaughters through the majority
That's
of
right.
the time, and shook and met, and
Yeah. Was that
that was Eliza.
Eliza? It wasn't
Cecilia.
Cecilia. Uh-huh.
It must have been quite an honor to have your whole family there with your
Yes.
daughter.
Yes.
At the governor's mansion, hosted by Jenny Sanford.
Right.
Um,
And her brothers and sisters were there.
Yeah, my brothers and sisters were all there.
Yeah.
We had a very good contingent.
Yes.
Were there other celebrations, other things that took place that year that your daughter was the state mother that you remember, that you participated in? I know she got to go to the national.
Yeah.
um,
Well, see, I did not live here with her. I was living in Northern Virginia at the time. So, it was just visiting here occasionally.
So you came down to visit for the tea.
Right, yes.
It was wonderful.
Yes, I did.
Well, we know that your daughter learned a lot of what she learned from you and from your leadership and your model as a mother.
Well, that is my greatest achievement, are my children, I say that. They have grown up to be responsible and God-loving people, which is a great blessing. That was wonderful.
All five.
Having
Yes.
interviewed your daughter, I see so much of you in her and her in you, in your answers and her answers. I mean, it's really a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
I want to thank you for giving us this time. I have one more question I want to ask you, but I'm just kind of sitting and just appreciating
Okay.
the joy of motherhood and the commitment that my children were the most important thing to me, my greatest accomplishment, as you said. And so one of your greatest accomplishments was also raising the South Carolina Mother of the Year in 2007. And so that's a beautiful thing. What does feminism mean to you?
Judy and I talked about this, and I think that men and women are equal. I just don't like to see women put above men because that's not the way I was raised. The man was the ruler of the house, as you might say. He made the important decisions. And I'm old-fashioned enough to, I retain that anyway. But women had to go out to work during the war, and I was part of that woman's workforce. And I can see that it is important for women to be recognized as equal to men, not above them. I just can't see this push to make women so important, so much emphasized. So I'm a little uncomfortable with it. The word feminism has a kind of a negative thing to me.
In your mind, feminism seems to be more trying to push women above men.
Yes. Yes.
Are you comfortable with, it sounds like you are, with women and men being equal?
Oh, yes.
And that could also be, in terms of the household, it could be equal sharing in decision-making, 50-50 partnerships.
Yeah. And I realize that sometimes women have to be the head of the house because the men are not capable of it. I mean, I know there are a lot of families that women take the initiative.
That's right. And there are a lot of single mothers,
Yes.
single parent households.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So, yes, I mean, I agree with you. If while you retain, you said I'm old-fashioned in that sense. I retain the way I grew up, which was the man really made the decisions in the household.
Right.
But I'm supportive of kind of 50-50 equal sharing in the household, women being recognized, men being recognized, neither one over the other,
Right.
but an equal dignity, equal respect in the work they do outside the home and the work they do inside the home.
Yes, agree.
I agree. Is there anything, are there any questions you have for us, or anything else you'd like to share that we haven't touched upon yet?
I just don't know. I have traveled a lot. I've had that privilege that I've been able to go to Australia, New Zealand. I have traveled through the Middle East, and some of my most wonderful experiences are saying I'm walking on the same path that Paul walked on the streets of Philippi. I have, seen the ancient civilizations. I've been to Crete and seen the Minoan there, and I've been through a lot of Europe. I've been through Yugoslavia before it was, it was still Yugoslavia.
Right.
And so I think traveling has been a wonderful experience to me. There are still places I would love to go, but all my friends, the people I traveled with, say they're too old to go. So
is that a piece of advice you would give to younger women to make sure they travel and see the world?
Do. I think that has been a lot of my education.
Absolutely.
Because I have learned so much from that. So, yes, and I see these children take these trips. I have a grandson that went to Greece and had a thing in Greece, and then went to Italy, and Judy took the children to England. My youngest son's children have been to Italy and France and Germany and Switzerland. Wonderful, wonderful. Oh, I'd encourage anybody that can travel before they get too old to do it.
And she's not too old yet.
May I ask, how old are you?
I'm 91. I will be 92 in December, so I'm well on the way to 92.
Wow. 92. You're a young, spry 92.
Well, not so spry, but I'm still have a fairly young attitude, I think.
Absolutely.
I hope.
It's been an honor for me to get to meet you, Jean Dowty, mother of Judy Pittard, South Carolina Mother of the Year of 2007, and to think about these intergenerational relationships, mother to daughter, the beautiful relationship you both have. I'm a mother of a son. I have one son. He's 5, going on 6. And I think about, I've done a lot of international traveling myself, so I think about when he'll be old enough that I'm comfortable enough taking him and going. I've kind of given up my travel as I was getting him from 0 to 5.
Yes.
So I think about that. And I also think about feminism I just want to share this with you. My dream or goal of feminism is as a very egalitarian system where women and men, just as we said earlier, have the equal respect, equal dignity, equal
Yes.
opportunity to be and do whatever they want to be and do.
Yes.
I think sometimes even boys and girls can be limited in what they are expected to be or do because of patriarchy or because of old-fashioned expectations sometimes of what a boy is or a girl is or a man or a woman. And so I hope that negative connotation is, I hope that's more of a stereotype and that we can work toward a true reality where boys and girls can be, like you said, can have equal dignity, equal respect.
One of the first things I learned to do at 4.5 was to knit in school, and the boys and the girls, we all taught to knit. Good hand-eye coordination, that's what they said. But I think it was to keep our hands busy.
That's so important. I'm not sure many boys are taught to knit anymore. But that's a good example of how we all need to be self-sufficient. And many of the same qualities and traits for boys and girls to learn to be self-sufficient would be the same, but we end up sometimes having these two tracks that are gendered paths towards self-sufficiency or caring for a home or so.
I think men should wash dishes.
That's exactly right. Sharing the work
Yes,
outside
yes,
the home,
right.
of society, of families.
Yes.
That's a beautiful vision. Any final thoughts, comments, or questions for us?
So how do you balance your life? Because,
It's hard. I'm a professor.
Yes.
I work at the university. I chair the political science department, and I direct the Women's and Gender Studies program.
And
And I engage in a lot of interesting projects, like the South Carolina Mother of the Year Award Oral History Project. And so my husband is home with my son today, so that I can be here doing this. But it's not easy.
no,
I think you spoke to it earlier beautifully, how difficult it is to this wanting more, taking on more roles and more responsibilities can just make it difficult to try to be the best you can be in all those spheres.
yes, I agree.
I certainly feel that struggle.
I mean, women are under more stress now than they used to be.
Well, I appreciate that. You make me feel better. Because you seem to do all that you've done with such grace and such, so thank you for
Life
saying
was
that.
easier for women in the past. I really believe that.
Well, it's an interesting question. You raised a lot of interesting questions for us to think about. Intergenerationally, through war times, internationally, everything. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us, your years of wisdom and your talents and gifts. And
It's been a pleasure. Thank
it's
you.
been a pleasure to meet you. And I see you both in each other. This is beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jean Dowty and Judy Pitter.